bagels and sitting and learning. Wow.
Very well. Eat some more.
Okay. Very heavy daf today. A lot of topics to discuss. Okay, we're finishing the Masech Mitzvah Shem today. We really only have an Amud. Rabbi, this is like Amud Yomi today. And the Mitzvah Shem tomorrow, Bez Hashem, we'll be picking up new Masechta Ma'id Katan, another contained, manageable Masechta that we could learn together in about a month exactly. And very Yismach, a lot of very enjoyable sugyas.
Even though it's about morning, at least.
Yeah, but it's, you know,
it's not
it'll
morning it was.
The best thing about learning Masechta Ma'id Katan, the best thing about Masechta Ma'id Katan is wonderful because then when Tisha B'Av rolls around and you want to learn something, you can have, like, there are sugyas you can learn. Meaning, you know, because you're familiar with the Gemaras. Otherwise, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's hard to learn anyways on Tisha B'Av. We won't be able to because we'll be doing Daf Yomi, but how do you do Daf Yomi on Tisha B'Av? You do it in the afternoon or you do it at night?
Do it at night.
Yeah,
You can't even do it in the afternoon, really.
Normally at night. People are not feeling well in the afternoon.
I don't think that's place who we might be all learning.
No?
We went
I don't
we did it at night, right? Because there's certain sugyas, I remember our school even sent them to you that you're allowed to learn during the day.
Uh-huh.
They don't want to
Most
Yeah,
of
but Gemara's in-
most of Daf Yomis are at night.
At night. Right.
Yeah, they say if you waste your time, you're better off.
Yeah. If it's
It's not done,
If it's like
it's not done public. It's not done publicly.
if you're watching what's the movie again? 8 Men Out. Is that the old movie? The movie, the Chicago Black Sox. Every year when I was in camp, they would play a movie. They play movies all day pretty much in camp, so that we wouldn't sit around and eat. And they used to play like The Princess Bride. That was like a big mainstay. And then the Black Sox scandal movie. It was Schul's Joe Jackson and whatever. So those are the movies they played. They didn't play like the Holocaust movies. They played. Keep us interested. Either way, very strange. Yeah. Okay, we're holding 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Compromises of running a camp.
Oh yeah, no joke. 5 lines from the bottom. We're holding Taner Rabbanan. Taner Rabbanan. Mokum shemafsikin b'Shabbos shachris. So this is talking about the actual kriya that we read week to week, day to day during the week. So we'll see a machlekes between Rameir and Rabbi Yehuda here, and then again Rameir and Rabbi Yehuda in the next halacha. Mokum shemafsikin b'Shabbos shachris. So on Shabbos you finish the parsha. So according to Rav Meir, who we're discussing now, he says that the place where you finish by Shachar Shabbos, Sham Karim B'Mincha, you pick up from there at Mincha, which means the next parsha. B'Mincha Sham Kairin B'Sheni, wherever you finish at Mincha, you then continue on Monday. And B'Sheni Sham Kairin B'Chamishi, and you continue the Thursday, which would of course then mean B'Chamishi Sham Kairin L'Shabbos Haba, which means at the time you get to Shabbos, you've already knocked out a good portion of laning, would make for much shorter Kriyas HaTorah if we held like Reb Meir.
And this inspired the Daf Yomi, like this continuous.
Yeah, exactly right.
Through the
Plowing through, yeah, it would be fantastic.
If you miss a day, you're in trouble.
Yeah, Divrei Reb Meir. So Reb Meir holds you break the week's laning up over all these times. And again, if you think about it, it makes sense. We're coming back to the idea that the way Ezra and Moshe were metaking these takanas was in order to have Talmud Torah D'Rabbim. So there really wasn't so much of an inyan the way we've become accustomed to it of on Shabbos you must lane the entire thing. Like that may be because we don't pass them like Rav Meir, so it's become our minig. But if you understand the sort of the tochen of what the original takanas were, they really were just to have Talmud Torah D'Rabbim. So what's the difference whether you're laning it all in one shot and then repeating it throughout the week versus whether you're just sequentially going through it? But either way, that's the truth of Rav Meir. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mokum Shemafsikin b'Shabbos Shachris, where you finish on Shabbos morning, meaning you finish the parsha Sham Kairin B'Mincha. You pick up from there at Minchas Shabbos, and then you do the same thing with B'Sheni U'B'Chamishi U'L'Shabbos Haba, meaning you're always starting from the beginning of that week's parsha. The way this is our minute. And Amr Reb Zeira halacha. What's the halacha? Like the second shita, our shita halacha. Mokum shemafsikin b'Shabbos Shachris Sham Kairin Minchas Sheni U'B'Chamishi U'L'Shabbos Haba. Ask the Gemara 1 second. You effectively just said the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. So why not just simply say the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda?
What's the longest in Machlek B'Shir? Is there any Machlek?
Meaning, what would be the argument why?
On Shabbos, you want to have the whole parsha?
So right. So the downside of Rav Meir is that I would think it's a tircha d'tzibur issue. To be honest with you, I mean, if
maybe
the whole parsha, or on Sunday.
Maybe some people missed Monday and Thursday, so on Shabbos everyone was there. That's a reason.
It could be. I think it's a Tirchei Tzibura issue, and the reason why I think it is a Tirchei Tzibura issue is because if you think we're going to learn the next Gemara where we're going to discuss the minhag of how one is supposed to say the brachas when they lane, there it seems, at least according to many Achronim, that the understanding over there is also predicated on a Tirchei Tzibura issue, and this is both a Machlekes of Meir and Yehuda. The Gemara is bringing one right after the other, and in Yanei Kriyas Torah. So it's not so much that it's muchach, that's the Pshat Mar Gemara. It's just
what are you identifying as Tirchei
the Tirchei Tzibura of having to make laning much longer, meaning you're having a Kriyas Torah de Rabbin, but who says you have to lane the entire parsha on Shabbos? Let's be honest, it's long.
So that's the reason to go like Rabbi Meir.
To go like Rabbi Meir, whereas Yehuda
the
would
reason
say
to go like Rabbi Yehuda is that maybe people miss. It's not Tirchei
you missed
Tzibura,
it.
maybe people miss Monday and Thursday.
Right. I think that's the issue here. Is there an issue of being choshesh l'tirchei tzibura or not? Now, the reason why what I'm saying may not necessarily work is because I do believe, if I remember correctly, when we get to the Gemara, we'll see that the shitas there of Rav Meir and Rav Yehuda are the opposite. Rav Meir, the one over there, is not choshesh l'tirchei tzibura, and Rav Meir is the one here. So you have to work that out. And maybe I'm right, maybe I'm
And
wrong.
in Eretz Yisrael, they've read much shorter parshios, as we discussed.
Right, that's true.
So that's
Every third year.
That's also interesting.
Right, meaning assuming they're splitting it up that way, and they're not just right. Okay. So either way, so we hold like Rabbi Yehuda. I asked the Gemara, the Lema, Reb Zera, why did you say it this long fashion of repeating all of Rabbi Yehuda's opinion? Why not just simply say halach ki Rabbi Yehuda? Gemara answers mishum de'afchuluhu. Gemara answers very simple. That Rabbi Yehuda and Rav Meir, the way we have it in the Mishnah, you're right, halach is like Rabbi Yehuda. But since there were different brises in different places where some people quoted the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Rav Meir, and some people quoted the opinion of Rav Meir in Rabbi Yehuda's name. So just simply stating that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda could have led to a problem where if someone had the wrong brisa, they'd be passing the wrong halacha. So by specifically stating here that the halacha is exactly what we are quoting in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, one won't make a mistake. And again, we don't normally do this, but it's only when we have a brisa that maybe has a somewhat questionable, sort of what do they call it in the police precinct? You have to have a
Lineup?
Provenance, chain of command.
chain of custody, whatever you call it. So therefore, there's an issue here. So therefore, they went ahead and specified it specifically. Okay, Tana Rabbana, new brisa. Pesach. They're talking here about what you do when you get up to the bima and someone calls you up for an aliyah. Pesach. This is going to be Shita Reb Meir. You open up the Sefer Torah. Viroya. You look at the words you're about to read or the Balper is about to read. Goylo. You close the Sefer Torah. Umevarech. You make the bracha. The choser uposech, you now open it up again, the koreh, and you read from the Kriyas Torah Div Rav Meir. Rav Meir says, out of a concern, we'll see in the Gemara in a minute. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Pesach, no, you open it up, look at the words, V'roya, umevarech, make the bracha while it's open, the koreh, and then you read. Meaning, what's their machlekes? The machlekes just in halacha is, do you need to re-close it to say the bracha, or can you say the bracha while it's open? What's the issue? Let's see in the Gemara. My time up. The Rav Meir, why does Rav Meir say you have to close it? Is kid'ula. The Amar Ula mipnei ma amru. Hakayra b'Torah. Lo yisayel miturgam on the person who's the Balkriya. Why should he not help the miturgam and explain what's going on? Meaning, add in some words or help him remind him of the pshat. Kidei shelo yoimru targum kasav b'Torah, so that people shouldn't think the person who's being kayra b'Torah is also reading the targum. And one might mistakenly conclude that what's inside Torah Shabbat might be some Aramaic, and that's a real concern. So Hachanami Kidei Shlo Yomer Brachos Ksuvim B'Torah. Therefore, Rav Meir says, keep your close up the Sefer Torah so that one won't mistakenly think the people that were the Amaratzim thinking, oh, maybe the brachos are written in the Torah. It's a chashash rachok. It's a very unlikely concern, but you can have such Amaratzis. And therefore, that's the reason why he says you got to close it up. For Rabbi Yehuda, Targum Ika Limitai, Brachas Lek Limitai. He says there's a distinction between these two concerns. It's possible for Targum, first of all, there is Targum in the Torah. So the fact that there already is Targum in the Torah, it's not such a far jump for Amaratzim who don't know all of the words of the Torah to conclude that maybe the Targum for these psukim are actually in the Torah. Whereas brachos, the only brachos you find in the Torah are like unconventional brachos, maybe Yisa, Hashem, Panav, and all these other things. But you don't actually have Baruch Atah Hashem, right? You don't have those types of brachos in the Torah that way. Therefore, the idea that an Amaretz is going to be such an Amaretz that he won't even realize that the words Baruch Atah Hashem, Elokeinu Melech Shabach Haponim, that's not written in the Torah. That's not a likely thing that a person will conclude, and therefore Rabbi Yehuda says that you don't have to close it up. Amar Reb Zera, and we'll get back to that in a second. Amar Reb Zera, Amar Rav Masna, halacha, and we do the same sort of formula here. Instead of just simply saying halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, he says halacha Pesach Uraya Umevarech V'Kairei. like Harib Yehuda. For the Gemara, V'lei malach Harib Yehuda. The Gemara says no, mishum de ifchlu. Same exact answer, that this brisa, the provenance of this brisa is questionable, and therefore we wanted to establish the halacha in the shita of the way we quote Rabbi Yehuda, so he said it in a more long fashion. So the question over here that the post can bring up is, what really is the machlekes, right? Meaning, Rameir is clearly saying you must close the Sefer Torah when you make the bracha, out of a concern that people will think that you see in the words the brachos, and they'll conclude that the Torah has those words in it, and that's not true. That's a concern we're nervous for. Therefore, Rameir says you must close it.
Concerned about when the Umpire says.
In general, yeah, it's.
Then eventually those words will get written in the Torah. If people start making a mistake that those words should be written in the Torah, then some scribe will say, "Well, I heard from my town that those words are in the Torah." And he'll write it. We have to be so careful.
We're less concerned today for Masorah because we have printing. It's very difficult. It would be significantly more difficult nowadays to introduce new dinim and new halachos today as it would be then, because we have recordings, we have printings, it would be very difficult if all of a sudden, like I decided to include a new line in the Gemara. Now you can have complete ignoramuses sitting around me who've never opened a Gemara and will never open a Gemara. Maybe I can convince them it's in there. But all they need to do is buy an art scroll, and I'm done for. You've got me. Look, there's no way I'll be able. No. I know the Rashi I'm reading, that you're reading, that we're all reading is what you see, but I have them. No, you can't mess with the Masorah when you have a lot of history. Whereas when things are really just being passed down, it is possible to squeeze in small things, because unless it's being said to the you're not going to make. You can't question. I heard there was 614 mitzvahs. That's going to be a tough one to pull off. Even if it's not written down, to get a whole nation to agree to that, that's a pretty difficult thing to do. But to say that I heard that chicken is allowed with milk because chicken's not really meat, you don't have it written down somewhere. That's something that you can easily see if someone has bad intentions, or someone's an ignorant person, or maybe they see you drinking milk. They don't know that it's milk from almonds. They see you're having a sandwich. And not just today. I'm talking about, back in the times when, you didn't know the halachas. It could happen. Now, you're asking, I think, I don't know if this is what you're asking, but it is a good question, which is, are these Amaratzim going off to another minyan and, running the minyan there? And they're going to, what's really the concern? The concern is the Amaretz is going to incorrectly, is he writing a Sefer Torah that we have to be nervous that he's going to... Exactly, whatever he's going to do. So I do hear, and I think you're touching on this idea, that although normally we do have a major concern about what Amaratzim will think, because they have to conduct themselves. What really is the practical consequence of this person walking around? So I think the answer is whether we want to acknowledge it or not, for a person to believe that there's a single word in the Torah that he adds, or a person believes that there's a single word of the Torah that's taken away, that falls under the category, however you want to define it. Amaratzis may be the nicest way to say it. You could very well be a mummer. You could be someone who has ein lo chelik lo lam haba. It's not so clear whether you're even breaking halacha, or perhaps you're breaking the Yud Gimel Ikrim. So it's not necessarily that we're concerned you're going to go out and do an Aveira. It's that we now have you walking around thinking something. It would be almost the same thing if, let's say, you understand that it's a break in the Yud Gimel Ikrim, as me saying to you, I'm nervous about this guy walking around thinking that the Trinity is technically okay. That's a problem. What's he going to do? It could be he doesn't change his life a bit, but if he walks around thinking like that, when he gets to the pearly gates, they ain't going to let him in. You know what I mean? So we have to. It's just simply a question of what they're going to think, and that's enough.
And just to show how common this is, not in a Sefer Torah, but in general, people had their books were written, manuscripts in the Middle Ages. And let's say Rashi, you had Rashi, and people would write their own ideas on the side in the margin. Like, here's a good way to explain a difficult Rashi. Then the next writer sometimes would incorporate those words into the Rashi because he didn't have a margin. And then it ended up that they thought that was Rashi's words, but we know that they weren't, because we can go careful, and even where it's far-fetched, we have to be careful.
So now, there's a halachic question that comes down over. So what are we effectively saying? We're saying there's a legs Rameh and Rabbi Yehuda. How is one supposed to go up and get an aliyah? Very halacha l'maisa.
Yeah.
You get called up.
Close it.
How are you supposed to do it?
And you see half the people do
Half
one
the-
way and half.
And they're all right, by the way. Which when I get to the end of what I'll tell you, everyone's
We
right.
all go by Red Mayor.
No.
Yeah, you're right. Sometimes.
No, the Gemara just said halacha Yehuda.
So the Gemara says halacha Rabbi Yehuda.
Explaining.
So this is the question: what does it mean when we say halacha is Rabbi Yehuda? Meaning, what is Rabbi Yehuda saying? Everyone knows what Rabbi Meir is saying. Rabbi Meir is saying you must close it. Is Rabbi Yehuda saying you can leave it open, or is Rabbi Yehuda saying you must leave it open? Meaning, what would be the two tzadim in the? Have a great day. What would be the two sides of that argument? Meaning, Rabbi Meir is very clear. He says it in the Gemara. We don't want people to incorrectly conclude that there are words in the Torah that are not there. Wonderful. Very, very serious concern, let's say. Rabbi Yehuda is not choshish for that. Does Rabbi Yehuda just simply mean, and since I'm not choshish for it, do whatever you want? Which you could read that into the Gemara. He's just simply saying, Rabbi Meir, I'm not choshish for your concern. And therefore, when he says leave it open, he doesn't mean you must leave it open. He says, if you want to leave it open, leave it open. Meaning, if you would ask Rabbi Yehuda, should you close it? He would say, yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm not saying not.
I don't care.
I mean, at best, I'm indifferent. Do I agree that there might be some concern for Rabbi Meir? Yes, not enough that I'll halachically mandate it, but maybe there's an argument to be made that, hey, listen, there's no one arguing that you shouldn't do it, so therefore go ahead and do it. But if you don't do it, it's okay. Not a big deal. That could be Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. And this, by the way, is how many understand him. I think it's brought like this in it's either the Tosfos Rush here, I forget exactly who I saw quoted him, that's exactly how they understand it. That Rabbi Yehuda is not arguing, no, you must do it this way. Rabbi Meir is saying you must do it this way. He's saying, okay, I hear what you're saying, Rabbi Meir, but I don't hold that that's a concern, and therefore do what you want. There are other poskim, I think it's brought in the Beis Yosef like this. He quotes Rabbeinu Sadia going. I'm not exactly sure who he's quoting. He says Rabbeinu Sadia, which I assume is Rabbeinu Sadia going, but it's hard to say. He seems to say that no, Rabbi Yehuda is saying an actual halacha. He's saying you must leave it open. Why? And this is where I'm bringing in what I said earlier. He says because he doesn't say this, but the Bach says Tircha de Sibura. He says you have the Balkair, he knows exactly what he's supposed to do. You're going to say, okay, close it up. He loses the spot, plus the time it takes to close it, the time it takes to open it. And this happens. You do see this. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it does 7 aliyahs. I mean, it adds up. You can add an extra 5-7 minutes just on the simple moving around over there. It's a Tircha de Tzibura. And so therefore, Rabbi Yehuda's holding, if I have to choose between the Tircha de Tzibura that is right in front of us right now versus the issue of maybe there's such a bor amaretz that might conclude that the words that are there are not really there, or vice versa. Therefore, he says, I'm not choshish for it. Which means there's not only are we saying that it's okay to close it, he's saying it's also to close it, meaning you must open it up, leave it open. So what's the halacha? So the way it's brought in Shulchan Aruch, the Shulchan Aruch paskins to be choshesh for he paskins like the din of the Gemara, like Rabbi Yehuda who says you should leave it open and look straight into it. The Ramah, I believe, paskins that one should leave it open, but he adds on, look to the side. Meaning, so when you're making the aliyah, if you look to the side, now all the amaratzim in the room, he's trying to get Rav Meir, meaning, and it could be what the Ramah means to say is Rav Yehuda is saying one should leave it open out of a concern for Tircha de Tzibura, but he's saying where Meir is concerned, however far it is, it's there, it's in the Gemara, let's be choshesh for it and turn to the side. And then I believe it's either the Bach or some other of the Gedolei HaPoskim say that really a better thing to do than what the Ramah is suggesting, you shouldn't, I think it's a Prima Gada maybe, don't turn away, but rather you close your eyes facing the Torah. I mean, you shouldn't turn away from the Torah. So keep your face at the Torah, the Sefer Torah is open, close your eyes, make the bracha. Now, this is obviously not going to work if you need help with the bracha. Meaning, if you don't know the bracha Baal Peh, it's certainly worse to say Hashem's name in vain and mess up the bracha, right? So all of this is all on the tzad that, of course, saying the bracha is not. But if you're going to get up there and like bumble through the bracha or not say the bracha properly, much better leave your eyes open and look at the actual words of the Sefer Torah, which means you're anyways not looking in the Sefer Torah, you're looking on the words. No one will conclude that you're reading it from the Sefer Torah itself. It's clearly on the bima, so there would be no problem in doing that. The Mishnah Brura, after quoting all of this big shtickle Torah that I just read, he said, the Biur Halacha says, honestly, There are minhagim like this, there are minhagim like that. Whichever you do is fine. So I mean, that's how it comes out practically at the end of the day. So when you see people going up there and you think, oh, look at this Amoritz, he doesn't know what he's doing. No, everyone who's doing it, whether they're doing it because they know it or they don't, that's a different story.
Everybody does what their father taught them to do when they were bar mitzvah, and then they just continue with their
This
whole
falls
life.
into the same category as far as I'm concerned as the minhag in Klal Yisrael, which I do not know where it came from, to turn around and face the Aron Bagadlu. I do not know where it came from. I've looked for it. I've read. I'm not that I'm such a researcher, but I've looked and looked and looked. I cannot find what the source of the minhag is to say Bagadlu, to turn around, face, the Baal Tefillah, turns around, holds the Sefer Torah, and does a Gadlu at facing the Aron. I mean, it's a beautiful idea.
Yeah.
Gadlu, I mean, it's wonderful. I think Tosas here mentions. Yeah. Right, Gadlu. I mean, I do not understand. It's not in the words. Tosas does mention here Gadlu,
No, because
but he says because of the six words of Gadlu are connected. It's a different thing.
That Shema Yisrael is not said Torah.
Yeah, I get it, but I'm saying
Maybe what you're least
Meaning, why are you allowed to turn around?
Yeah, that's a
because the Aron was normally empty. You know, they took out the Torah, so it was like you're holding the Torah. You don't need cover to the Aron, but the Torah is more important.
yeah. I mean, still, I mean, there's another one also, which is I don't know where the pinky came from. The
Does
pinky
it
by Hag, but I don't know where the pinky came from. I know. I've seen in writings the etzba,
Not
the
everyone
pointing.
does the pinky.
I've seen, but it's
Yeah,
very common.
yeah.
The pinky is very. I mean, in Shtiblach, no, I'm not saying no. I'm sure there is a very chashuv. Yeah. Minhag Yisrael Torah.
You know what I'm going to add? I'm going to add that when Rabbi Yehuda said his halacha, he was talking about where the person who made the bracha read. So he was saying, you know, it's not so important, meaning one way or another. But now that the Balkori and the person making the bracha are
It could very well be the
it could very well be that the Tzibur is worse.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
And therefore,
Could be. And I mean, you can still learn the halacha, learn the Gemara that Rabbi Yehuda was only saying in Eitzah Tova,
right.
but it could be nowadays.
Right. Meaning you have to ask the Balkori, how good are you? Are you the kind of person
actually
who
do
can
believe.
immediately find
I actually
it?
do believe.
Yeah.
So let's take a look at Tosas over here. Goyloi, the end of the Tosas. It's like where the little base is at the first line. L'chatchila hu goyloi. Tosas is telling us the minhag of what we do. L'chatchila hu goyloi usoismai koydem sheyevarach kadei shelo yoimru ha'hamon she'abrachos kesuvos. But that sounds like Rav Meir. He sounds like l'chatchila you should do like Rav Meir. But the Eved. And I don't even know what B'di Eved here means. Does he mean B'di Eved? You don't have to repeat it. But B'di Eved maybe he means B'shas Atchak B'di Eved. Aval B'di Eved ein lochos shaharei lo shchichi amei haaretz kol kach ata. Right? He said in ata it sounds like he means in his time, in the times of Taisus. Yeah. Aval la'achar shekarabo. Then he tells what to do at the end. He says everyone agrees at the end. You close it up. You roll it up because there's no tir for the zibura. Because in the end of the day you're going to close it up anyways afterwards to cover the Torah. So Tosas sounds like he's saying, like Rav Meir, which is very shver. The Gemara is very clear. The halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. So the Mefarshim say here a similar idea to what you just said, which is that not exactly what you said. They say it a little different. What they say is that in the times of the Gemara, there were no Amaratzim like this, right? And therefore, Rabbi Yehuda was saying the chash isn't so real. That there was a time in between the times of the Gemara and the times of, let's say, the Rishonim, where the Amaratzis got very, very big. And it was during that time that it became an issue to be Choshesh for Rav Meir, even though the halach is like Rabbi Yehuda. And what Tosfos is saying is that nowadays, that chashash, which was not the chashash of the Gemara, rather the chashash of that in-between time, it's no longer really relevant, but you know what? That became sort of the halacha after the Chsimas HaGemara, and therefore he says, if you can be choshesh for it, be choshesh for it. But loyal, he passes like Rabbi Yehuda, meaning that's what he says. But either way, okay, everyone agrees when you say the bracha at the end. The second bracha, just to clarify, that should for sure be closed up. And the reason why is because, again, if there is a concern out of reading out of the Sefer Torah that we might think the words are there, however far of a chash that is, there is no benefit in keeping it open, because there is no tircha v'tzibura issue that you're solving, and therefore everyone would agree you should close it. Okay, continues the Gemara. Amar Reb Zera, a one-liner. Amar Reb Zera, Amar Reb Masna, haluchos vehabimos, ein behem mishum kedusha. Rashi, a very interesting, very rare Rashi. Rashi, if you take a look at the fourth line of Rashi, the last wide line of Rashi up above, haluchos, lo yadati mahen. I have no clue what this means. The word Gemara is mentioning halacha of what does not have kedushas, pashtus kedusha at all. He says luchos. He does not mean the luchos like that are like imprinted on the aron. Luchos lo yadati mahin. V'yesh mefarshim hein ha'asuyin l'svarim shelanu she'enan asuyin begillion. If you have a sefer that is not on a scroll, does not mean the atzei, doesn't mean the Eitz Chaim. What he means is, according to Mefarshim, I think, is they would use a wooden stick as a paperweight to hold down these disparate pages that would maybe fly around if they wouldn't have something holding it down. So it was not even. So what he's saying is remember, there's different levels of kedusha. There's kedusha, there's tashmish kedusha, there's tashmish to tashmish kedusha, and then there's mitzvah, there's tashmish to mitzvah, tashmish to tashmish mitzvah, whatever it is. So he said, the Gemara is saying here, the luchais, these don't even rise to the level of tashmish to tashmish. All it really is just a practical thing you're using in the shul to hold down the papers. Rashi saying he's not 100% sure.
What Tananel seems to say it's the margins of the Torah. I don't know exactly.
Yeah, not clear what that means.
You cut it up and you throw away the margins.
I'm not sure. Yeah. I saw a shot like that. I didn't understand what it means.
But he says it.
Right.
He doesn't say that.
Yeah, there are some who say the luchos here are referring to the Eitz Chaim, which makes no sense. I mean, that is mamish, tashmish kedusha for sure. I mean, it literally has the cloth on it. Bima is here does not mean the bima. The bima in the Mishnah is Zichar has it, right? That's for sure has kedusha, tashmish kedusha. Although it could be a tashmish, but here it's saying it has no kedusha at all. This they say in different mefarshim say that it's referring to either like when the king, Rashi says here that it's when the melech would read by Hakel, or it could simply be referring to like a stoop that they would stand on when they would duchin. A lot of different pshatim. Those are just those I think are like the chairs and the tables in a shul, basically. What it's saying is they don't have any kedusha, and therefore you can really basically do whatever you want with them. They don't have any tefisas kedusha. They don't have any money. The money that you sell does not have to be used for inyane kedusha, and therefore it would be mutter. Amar Rav Shaftei, Amar Rav Yochanan. We're going to see a bunch of statements from Rav Shaftei in the name of Rav Yochanan related to these inyanim. Amar Rav Shaftei, Amar Rav Yochanan. Hagolol sefer Torah tzarich sheyamidenu al hatfar. When you're doing what we'll call gelila. So there's two phrases. There's hagba and there's Galila. And it's important to understand here that there are different minhagim. We're all Ashkenazim here. So for us, when I think of Hagba and I think of Galila, we clearly see them as two separate acts. There's the mitzvah of Hagba, which is a chashuv mitzvah, to lift the Torah, to show it to the nation. And then there's a separate mitzvah of sealing up the Torah, of Galila. Now we do it really more or less in one shot, right? We finish the Sefer Torah reading, and then we lift the Sefer Torah up, show it to the nation, and then we roll it together. Sfardim, they do Hagba before Kriyas HaTorah and Chabad. They show the nation the Torah, then they read from it, and then afterwards they don't do any Hagba. They're Golo the Torah. So they really separate the two things up into two separate things.
You're talking about Sfardim, the stand?
Yeah, where they have the Sefer Torah sits on the bima, on a flat bima so that it doesn't roll, and it's always encased, which we'll get to in a minute. And then Minach Chabad is sort of in between. They do the Hagba before, and then the Galila is done after on the bima. They don't do this whole business, which is a very practical matter also. I can't tell you how many times I've seen where it's wobbling or someone's wrists aren't strong and you have a little kid doesn't know what he's doing. And then it ends up leading to, of course, touching the Sefer Torah, which is a big problem itself, because what ends up happening is sometimes you have a big guy, he goes big, but he overestimates how good he can go, and all of a sudden he's like this wobbling, or he's not sure of where, he doesn't, he gets excited, and then all of a sudden you're sitting there, in order to show off your lats or your traps or whatever muscle that is, you end up coming into other problems. So either way, Zakr Shaftem Rabbi Yochanan. Hagoyel Sefer Torah tzarich she'amidenu al atfar. This is out of a concern that it shouldn't tear. You want to make sure that the line, the where the stitches connecting the cloth should be in the middle. You shouldn't have it where it's just cloth in the middle. You should try to make it that you have a connector in between. And this is mostly out of concern of tearing, that it should be the seam. Thank you. The Amar Reb Shaftem Rabbi Yochanan Hagoyel Sefer Torah goyel mi b'chutz ve'ein goyel mi b'fnim. There are many different psakim here. We're going to say over Rashi. Rashi explains that if, let's say, for whatever reason, you have a Sefer Torah that you're using as a yachid, and you want to close it up. So how are you supposed to do this? So he says you put it on your lap, and you have the Atzei Chaim perpendicular to you, right? So they're lying across your lap. So he says, obviously, it's better to use the farther ones and roll it towards you versus the other way and hope that the angle of your knees won't allow the second one to roll off. It's not really saying a halacha. He's just saying a practical thing, pretty smart, but really, honestly, unnecessary. Other Rishonim say that it might even be referring to when we do Hagba, like what do we do on Simchas Torah? We do this whole business and we show it to the nation. It says, although we do it then, generally speaking, one is supposed to do it facing you, right? So that's another way to read it. Hagolo Sefer Torah, Hagolo Sefer Torah, Goylo mi b'chutz, ve'ein goylo mi b'fnim, meaning you're goylo from the outside, meaning the ksav faces the person doing the hagba. Different pshatim over here. And all the poskim, they shtup in how they need to get out their halach from this line. Either way, it continues, ukishu mahadkoi mi b'fnim, ve'enoi mahadkoi mi b'chutz. So this is another thing, like you shouldn't lean it. Like when you're tightening it, you should do it from the inside and not from the outside. Again, there's many other pshatim over here of being mahadikit. I think Rashi over here says, so he says it's a cover for the ksav, meaning that you shouldn't reach over and tighten it from the other side, because then it's like sort of like a bizayon that you're passing over the Torah. A lot of different shatim here also. But either way, you have a minion, you had Kriyas HaTorah. A gadol shebehem gadol sefer Torah. Galila should go to the most chashuv of the people in the shul. Now, how does that work with our minion? We give it to the child, the katan. So the Shulchan Aruch and the Mishnah Berurah talk about this. But let's just finish the Gemara. A gadol noitel schar kulon. Gemara says the person who gets galila takes all the schar. Ask the Gemara, Dam Rabbi Shimon Levi, Asara Shekar B'Torah, Gadol Sefer Torah, Kibul Schar Kulon. The Gemara, Schar Kulon, what do you mean? He gets all of the schar. We all lose out our schar because he gets the schar of Galila. No, Ela Ema Kibul Schar Keneged Kulon, meaning the schar one gets for being Gadol of the Torah is Keneged all of the other things. And again, I think there's a Musar idea here. Obviously, what we're saying here is that Galila said, what are you effectively doing when you're Gadol of the Torah? It's the most clear expression of Kavod HaTorah. Why? Because everything up until that moment in time is practical. I need to take it out. I need to open it. I need to find a place to read. We're doing them, meaning everything until that point has a purpose. What is this? This is purely just to put the Torah away with respect. It's a Kavod HaTorah. It's literally the only part of the process where it's like you're putting it away. Who says you got to put it away? Like, what's the big deal? So you put it away. It's like, done with the sefer. Done. But to place something down with respect, to tighten it up nicely, that's what you do when you care about something.
It's also chesed for the next person. Like in a base measure, someone takes that fence farm, learns,
and then sitting on the table. Exactly. Right. Same. No, we don't do that here.
The one cleaning your both all day.
So the question then becomes, what do we mean over here? Hagadol shebehem gadol sefer Torah. So I believe. I have to remember correctly, but I believe the Mishnah Berurah explains that when we're discussing two different mitzvahs here, there's the mitzvah of Hagba. Mitzvah Hagba is very chashuv the mitzvah, which is lifting and showing the Sefer Torah, and then there's the mitzvah of Galila, of closing it. And I think he says, even though it's a mitzvah to do it begadol, he says the minhag has become to give it to a child, because it's really the only mitzvah in shul that a young boy has the ability to do properly, because it doesn't require strength, at least in our minhag. Obviously, a Sefer Torah to a Sephardi boy would be a problem because that's much heavier because they're holding the case. But for us, it's he's not lifting it; he's just closing it. And honestly, let's be honest, the person who's doing Hagba is really doing most of the work anyways when he's being Gadol of the Torah, or at least he is, when I do it. I end up being the one who's doing it, and their guy on top is sort of just and so all he's doing is wrapping it. The other thing they talk about is when the person does Galila, there's many different minhagim where the gartel should go. I believe in Chabad, the meaning is to put it on the lower third. Other Chassidish minhagim are to go mamish in the middle. I think most Litvish places you go the upper third of the Torah where you put it. There are some shuls who have a minhag to give out the Keser Torah, to put it onto a separate kibbut. The Mishnah Berurah brings that one shouldn't call up a father and a son to do Hagba and Galila. Yeah, although there are shitas in the poskim who are makel for that, as long as you don't have a minute to call up with their name, so that it shouldn't look. And if everyone knows he's the father or the son, it's a problem basically. So if you're calling up a father and a son, and everyone knows he's the father and the son, really ideally you shouldn't do that. Similar to the way we don't like to call up a father, and halachically you're not supposed to call up a father and a son, one right after the other. It seems to be like it just looks a little funny. Again, a lot of these minhagim, it's
like this family is so big, and then
that could be
something bad happens.
Could
At
be
least that's the way.
Could be a yichus issue, which is really another reason why we don't like to do the aliyahs in a row. if you're calling them up in a row, people. I mean, it's funny. The halacha itself causes the problems. Like, why are we calling them up one after the other? Because people will say that he's not the son of the one that you called up. But that's only because there's a halacha. You're not supposed to call somebody up after his son. It's not so.
Circular.
Yeah. But either way, continues the Gemara. So that's mitzvahs kalila. The Omer of Shaftam Rabbi Yochanan. Minayin. Once we're quoting from Rav Shaftam, name of Rabbi Yochanan. Minayin shemishtamshin bebaskol. How do we know that you are allowed to be mishtamish with a baskol? It assumes that if you hear a baskol, you're not crazy. The shaila is, am I allowed to rely on the baskol as a deciding factor in something I'm supposed to do? Rashi says, mishtamishin bebaskol, im biliboy lahaskil davar. A person's thinking about starting a new project. V'shama kol, oy hin, oy lav, whether it's a yes kol or a no kol. Holech achrav, ve'ein kan mishum nichush. We don't have to be concerned that you're like playing with magic and doing sort of like divining. Yeah, it's Nisa Deraisa, meaning it's a big chiddush. Meaning, you're mishtamish bebasko.
Because that's exactly what nichush is.
Yeah,
meaning they used things.
It's like it's like it's flipping a coin.
Yeah.
It's like if Hashem wants me to daven in this shul, then I'll flip a coin. If it's heads, then I'll do it. If not. Meaning it's like you're pushing your own version of signs from Hashem. So I don't know if the halacha, the words are imishtamshin b'kol, but there's a halacha of nichush. It's a pasuk in the Torah.
There's a chazal.
Well, he just paskin mishtamshin bebaskol. Rabbi Yochanan.
So let's see.
You're saying he's saying he's arguing with someone.
Maybe I'm wrong.
It could be.
I remember Gemara. I thought.
No, I don't know. There's a Taisus Yantiv in the 16th parak of Yevamis.
It might be Yevamis, yeah. The parak of Mishnah. You have to look.
Okay.
Maybe in some context you shouldn't use a baskol.
Either way, so he says Shenemar. He says the pasuk says Shenemar va'oznecha tishmana davar me'achrecha lemar, meaning if you look at the whole pasuk says va'oznecha tishmana davar me'achrecha lemar zeh haderech lechubay ki sa'aminu v'chisas sas meilu, meaning you should only do it. I'm not 100% how to read the pasuk, but va'oznecha tishmana davar me'achrecha, you can let the words that come into your ears, you can listen to figure out what to do. So that is okay. And again, the distinction here between between the concern about the Issa Deraisa and what's going on here is if you hear a baskol, that's not you saying, Hashem, if X, Y, and Z happens, then I'll do this. If it happens, then I'll do. Here, you heard a baskol. You're in the middle of deciding, what should I do? Should I invest? Should I not invest? And then all of a sudden the baskol comes out and says, you know what, you should do it. So that's mutter. Now, Zafta Gemara, V'hani mili, Deshama kal gavra b'masa, it's only when you hear the voice of a man in the city, the kal itza b'dabra, and you hear the voice of a woman in the field, like in the forest. The pashtus is that because you wouldn't expect a woman to be, Rashi says, kol she'eno yimatzuihu. Baskol ba elov. It's only when the voices you're hearing are very unlikely to be heard. So if you're walking in the forest and all of a sudden you hear a man's voice, men are in the forest, so that does not mean necessarily that's a real baskol. Whereas if you hear a woman's voice, that's considered very unlikely to hear there. Whereas I don't understand in Bimasa, in the city, men are in the city. Women are in the city.
It seems to be saying at the time the men go to the fields, meaning during the day when they're working in the fields, and men are not there, you hear a man.
So if you're in the place
where they're not.
Right. Okay.
Oh, yeah. That's the famous Gemara. Tanur Shach Noi.
You're talking back in the earlier Gemara?
Where's Emashkichem Baskol?
That's something else. That's talking about to learn halacha from it. Yeah. Here we're talking about whether a person's supposed to. Yeah. So, now this halacha here of mishtamshin bebaskol, and it's only, and again, it doesn't mean. Meaning it's mashma that if you hear a woman's voice in the city or a man's voice in the forest, you're not allowed to listen to it, and you would be able to it's the right.
Weird.
You assume it's some guy.
Right. Vehuda amar hin, vehuda amar lav, and of course it only means if the baskol is just yes or no, that doesn't work. It's got to be yes, or no, then it's okay. Okay, fine. A person who reads the Torah without Pashtus, I think this means the truck. If a person just gets up there and ignores, and again, you can easily see why this is a problem because you're sort of disregarding the Torah Shabbal Pev, the truck, which is a real thing. Not only that, Vishona below Zimra, or a person learns, and the Pashas here means he learns without a niggin, meaning a person just learns dry, doesn't learn with a niggin, doesn't learn with a little bit of simcha while he's learning. All of a kasav oimer, the pasuk says about him, V'gam anino sati lehem chukim lo tovim, and umishpatim lo yichyu bohem. It's said on such a person that I've given him laws that are not good, and laws that he will not live by. So therefore, you see, all of a kasav oimer, that it's basically a bad thing. A person shouldn't learn Torah without a little bit of geshmak. You should be very happy when you're learning. It's a shira, and a person should lane with the trup. Again, you see a little makar here for singing, Rabbi.
Yeah, I see it.
Maskefla Abaye mishum de lo yada lepsume kala, because a person doesn't have a pretty voice. Mishpatim lo yichum b'ham kari sabay. You're going to call him such a person because he doesn't like singing? Ela kederav misharsha. No, you're right. The Amar Shnei Talmidei Chacham, which is the Gemara I think came up in Tainus, I believe. Shnei Talmidei Chachamim hayoshim be'ir achas ve'ein noichin zeh ez zeh b'halacha. You have two Talmidei Chachamim in a city, and they have a big machlekes about which way the tefillin should go, or whatever, or what time minyan should be, whatever. They have a machlekes in halacha. Aleya makaz, and they don't have a way of solving their issues. Aleya makaz v'aymer begamani nasati l'chuk v'leitay mishpatim lo yichu b'hem. Fine, but what do you see from here? You see, at least in the Havamina of the Gemara, that okay, maybe you don't want to say that you can call him in that pasuk, but the Gemara is not coming off of the idea that those two things are not good things. One should sing when he learns, and one should make sure that he lanes with the trup. If you take a look over here, Taisvis, Hashoyne b'loy Zimra. Hashoyne b'loy Zimra. Shahayu regilin lishnais ha-mishnayos b'Zimra. They would learn up mishnayos with song. Lefi shahayu shoyne noisan al peh. Since they were being done bal peh, val yidei kach hayu niskarim yoser. So this sounds like the idea that the Taisus Yontif quotes in Erech, famous Taisus Yontif, who says, he's trying to understand what's pshat in all of these chasurim mechserism, what the Gemara says. The Gemara says, I have a problem in the Mishnah, and I have a raya against you from a Mishnah. And the Gemara says, you're right, and chanami, chisuri mechsera v'hachitan. We'll have to do surgery on the Mishnah, change the words. Well, what's going on over here? If that's really the pshat, and we know that we're always saying how Mishnayos have a Messiah, the Bryce and Tesefta is less so, that means Rabbi Yehuda Anasi didn't do this mistakenly. That's not what it means, Chas Shalom. It means he intentionally put the Mishnah in that incorrect wording, and this Masorah is there, and it's Chasuri Mitzvah V'Hachitanis. The Taisiyanta says, based on this Taisvis, that the reason why it was done, the Chasuri Mitzvah, was for this exact reason. The same reason why they would sing the Mishnayos, which is in order to remember it, because of Torah Shebal Peh. They would also, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi would also, in order to make sure that they would remember it, it had a certain surah. So even though, yes, it would have been better for him to do the longer version, but that would have made it harder to remember it. Therefore, he changed it. Two other pshatim, if I remember them. Two other pshatim as to what the pshat Nechasuri Mitzvah V'Achitani is. Shimon Anstropoli was a big guy. He said that it was based on Kabbalah, meaning that really Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi understood that the Mishnah had to be put the way it was, and it was based on Sisrei Torah, and although yes, in Hanami, in Nigla, of course, one would.
No, he can't go.
He's got to go.
Then finish off.
Yeah, we'll give him a second. Yeah.
Yeah.
One other shot, which I think is a beautiful shot,
Yeah.
is that.
That one's far-fetched.
Yeah, very far-fetched,
Yeah.
and plus it doesn't sit well. The Chasuri Mitzvah V'Hachitani means like this. So if you have, let's make sure I have the heshbon in my head. If you have the Mishnah, one second, how did he say it? I don't want to mess it up. So you have the Pshat from Taisus and Taisus Yontiv. You have Shimon Astropoli, and you also have the Pshat of Chisuri Mitzvah V'Hachitani, meaning that it has what to do with. I forget it. I'll come back. The first Pshat already is they would the same way they would sing the Mishnayos in order to remember them. So too, like Taisus Yontiv says, based off of that, they would sing the Mishnayos. In order to make the Mishnayos fit, so they would meaning because they would sing it, you had to you can't put lyrics in. They're messing up the lyrics. There was a way to remember it. I'll remember the other one and I'll tell it to you after.
Okay.
Yeah, Amar Pranach, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Kol ha'oiches sefer Torah arum nikfer arum. A person who, and there's a million different shatim here. A person who will read it the way we understand it. A person who touches the sefer Torah's klaf with exposed hands, nikfar arum, he'll be buried arum, meaning without tachrichim. Meaning the implication is you dealt with the sefer Torah without covering yourself, your hands. So too when you're buried, you're going to be buried without tachrichim, without the Orim Salkadaita, the Gemara said, you really have a Havamina. A person doesn't get Tachrichin just because he touched the Sefer Torah while he was alive. Ella Ema Nikfar Orim B'lei Mitzvahs. It's just saying a concept that you're Nikfar, you're buried without mitzvahs. B'lei Mitzvahs Salkadaita, you lose all your mitzvahs just because. I was like, what are you saying over here? Ella Amar Abayi Nikfar Orim B'lei Oisa Mitzvah. You don't get that mitzvah? Okay, so then it really brought it much closer to home. You're right, you broke an Aveira. So guess what? The mitzvah of showing Kabbalah Torah you didn't do. Rabbi Yanai, Breda, Rabbi Yanai, Saba, Mishmei, the Rabbi Yanai, Rabba. Rabbi Yanai in the name of Rabbi Yanai, in the name of Rabbi Yanai. Mutav Tiglal Hamatpeches Ve'al Yigla Sefer Torah. Better that you should do Galila with something on your hands to be Mekayim this din. Ve'al Yigla Sefer Torah, and don't touch the Sefer Torah itself. There is one interesting sheet of the Rambam who says that it's not mefurish in the Rambam, but there's a diak from Chaim Brisker in the Rambam. Kol ha'oiches sefer Torah aram literally means if he's not dressed.
Mm-hmm.
If he himself is not, if he has erva, that's what it's referring to. It's much more meduyik in the Gemara. It makes sense that you would have at least a havamina. That why are we referencing at all the fact that you're buried? The answer is much more geschmack to say you're buried naked if what you did was that
Why
way.
do they use the word arum?
Arum is also
It relates to Mishnah Brachos about
the Mishnah about Krishma. What are you talking about?
Yeah, in the mikvah.
Wow.
Let's finish the Gemara. Vidaber Moshe Esmayadei. We call in the Mishnah Esmayadei Shema Bnei Yisrael Mitzvos Shekar Nois Kol Echad Becha B'Smanai, which is going back in the Mishnah about all of the different Kriyas HaTorahs for each Yom Tov. Tanu Rabbanan Moshe Tikal Yisrael Shu Shaylin B'Darshan B'Nyana Shal Yom Hilchas Pesach Pesach Hilchas Aseres Aseres Hilcha is Chag B'Chag. Right? Moshe was Misaka in this halacha that you have to learn the halachas of that Yom Tov on that Yom Tov. How does that fit? How does that fit with the idea that we're supposed to learn 30 days before? That's a big steer they ask. But what's the Tachana? Is that the Tachana is supposed to learn on that day, or is it 30 days before? Different poskim. Some Mefarshim say that the day of 30 is only referring to Pesach because of the Hilchas Chametz. It's very complicated, whereas otherwise you have to learn the halach of the Yom Tov on that day. The other Mahalchim are that no, Lo'olam is going on all of the Yomim Tovim, and the day of 30 is halacha. You don't have to learn the halachas 30 days before, but rather the halacha is that that's when you start to ask. It's a chiyuv on the Talmidim to start asking. But in Chanami, if you know the halachas, you don't have to. But on the day itself, you must learn. Different mahalchim through. Here, v'salikala neseches Megilla. I'm trying to remember what was that third shot. I had it in my head, and then it just. What is the other reason?
Is it possible that their Torahs didn't have the wooden parts, and that it's a little mashma that way? That they're talking about.
There are. So
we roll it with the wood. We don't have a lot of these issues.
Right. So I'm not sure.
Yeah.
To answer your question, I know that one of the things that's discussed about the sugya of being goyled with touching it, arum, is they're trying to figure out, because I think the Beis Yosef seems to say that so remember.
I mean, I could ask the question another way. A Torah today that has no wood, is it kosher to read from? Does anyone?
So I don't think there's a shaila about whether it's kosher or not.
It is,
but yeah,
it's just the wood is a convenience.
Yeah.
It's a way of lifting it.
Yeah.
Back again.
Oh yeah. Mitzvah Shem tomorrow.
This gives you a feeling of what an Amud Yomi would be like, meaning slower, more leisurely.
Yeah.
Same thing. Don't rush. You know what? The only thing is, which I have to say, if it were Amud Yomi, they would do it in half the time at the same breakneck pace, so people could leave. So I'm not sure that that's.
Let's put it this way.
Yeah.
There are,
You know what I mean? Oh, I got the gorgeous.